when I actually collapsed from exhaustion, sleep deprivation, burnout, hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone. And that was the beginning of my journey of acknowledging not just burnout in myself, but burnout across the planet.
Welcome to At the Heart of It. Welcome to At the Heart of It. I'm Nancy Brown, CEO of the American Heart Association. According to a recent study, 53% of women report that their mental health suffers to the point of burnout due to their job. Burnout can manifest in so many ways, and my next guest knows this firsthand, and millions of people every day look to her guidance and her thought leadership on this topic. She's even built a company around it. Get ready for some real tools that you can use for self-care at work and beyond.
Improving lives, one good night's rest at a time. Meet Arianna Huffington. Arianna is the founder and CEO of Thrive Global, a company dedicated to health and wellness. She is also the founder of the Huffington Post. Born in Athens, Greece, this media mogul turned sleep enthusiast received her degree in economics from Cambridge University. After graduating, Arianna found her passion for writing. Arianna is the author of 15 books, including her most recent, The Sleep Revolution. After an injury in her office, Arianna shifted her focus to helping others find work-life balance and prioritize sleep. She has appeared on Time Magazine's 100 list and Forbes' special rundown of the world's 100 most powerful women. Today, Arianna will help us find the balance to living a healthier life.
My dear friend Arianna Huffington is here. Welcome, Arianna. Thank you for being with us today.
And Nancy, thank you so much. It's so great to be with you. You know, ours has been a long friendship, and I've always been so aligned with your mission and your passion.
Well, I am so grateful to you for all that you do to bring health and well-being and prevention to the front of everyone's mind. And we're going to talk more about that. But before we do, I've got some fun questions to start us off. I call these my signature 5. Are you ready to play? Arianna, what is the last TV show you watched or streamed?
So the last TV show is Billions. I don't know if you're as addicted to Billions as I am, but it came back after a pandemic hiatus, and I have made this one pact with myself, which is I'm only allowed to watch my favorite shows on my treadmill.
Good idea. That is a great idea.
Yeah, so I ended up kind of watching literally 2.5 hours of Billions on my treadmill.
Well, good for you for getting 2.5 hours of exercise. That is something we should all pay attention to. What's the last great meal you had?
The last great meal was actually with my daughters and my oldest daughter's new husband at a restaurant called King's in New York, which is a tiny restaurant. We ate outdoors. It started by some amazing women. It has a tiny menu, which I like. You know, I don't want too many choices. And we loved it. It's kind of strange being on the pavement.
Absolutely. And being with family is so important, and great meals are good for us all. What's the last song you listened to?
I have a song that I play on repeat, which is by Taylor Swift, You Need to Calm Down.
Ah, that's a good one. That is a good one. Arianna, what was your first job?
My first job, Nancy, was writing a book. Can you believe that? I was at Cambridge studying economics, and I did a whole debate on the changing role of women. And a publisher happened to see the debate, which was televised, and wrote to me and asked me if I would write a book on the views I expressed in the debate. And I wrote back and I said, I can't write. And he wrote back and he said, can you have lunch? And he literally took me to lunch and offered me a book contract with a very modest advance. But that's how I ended up writing my first book at 23.
I love that. That is so inspirational. Ariana, I could answer this question for you, but I'd love your thoughts. What is your superpower?
My superpower is being able to sleep anywhere.
Anywhere. That is a superpower. I'll need to get some tips from you offline.
At least I don't accidentally fall asleep, at plays and movies and all the ways we fall asleep when we don't intend to, which is a sign of sleep deprivation, as you know.
Yeah, I know, and we're going to come back and talk about that in just a minute. But let me start by just teeing this up a little, Ariana. You have been called influential, outspoken, and fearless, which I agree with all of those words to describe you. You have a remarkable story, and you are transforming so many lives. But it's your own personal and professional experience that's central to this journey. Tell us about when you knew you had to help other people thrive.
Well, it started with my own journey, Nancy, in 2007. 2 years into building the Huffington Post, the divorced mother of two daughters, when I actually collapsed from exhaustion, sleep deprivation, burnout, hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone. And that was the beginning of my journey of acknowledging not just burnout in myself, but burnout across the planet, the stress and burnout epidemic. And I started covering these issues exhaustively on the Huffington Post. And by 2016, I decided I didn't just want to raise awareness, I wanted to help people move from awareness to action and to help them change behaviors.
And boy, have you done that. And we talked at the beginning of the show that more than half of women report that their mental health suffers to the point of burnout during their job. Define burnout for us, especially with the pandemic as a backdrop, and what symptoms should we be more aware of?
Actually, that's one of the good things since the pandemic, Nancy, that we've all become more conscious of the symptoms we need to be watching for. And even the World Health Organization acknowledged burnout as an occupational hazard. And the three symptoms they are identified are one, a sense of cynicism and negativism about your job and your life, the opposite of being optimistic, even in the middle of challenges. The second is just sheer exhaustion that goes beyond just being tired. And the third is when you don't feel that you can do a job, professional inefficacy, as they call it. So these symptoms are signs that we can look out for with friends, in the questions we ask and in the signs we notice.
So, with everything you've learned about burnout over the years, what is your position on the pros and cons of multitasking? And does that impact burnout?
Absolutely. So, first of all, the truth is that there is no such thing as multitasking when our brains are involved. It's different if you're washing the dishes and listening to a podcast or um, washing your hands or whatever. But if you're doing tasks that involve your brain, like my talking to you now and trying to look at my texts, that's incredibly exhausting, stress inducing, and really doesn't work. And yet, our culture is sort of built on multitasking. We think it makes us more productive, but it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think also people in a work environment think that your ability to show that you can multitask means that you can be more successful, and probably an ability to focus on getting the work done might actually be what defines success. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, especially doing deep work, creative work. And in fact, one of the things in our Thrive app that we focus on is setting boundaries in terms of how we connect with our phone and social media so that we can really avoid all the constant interruptions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anytime we are interrupted when it's not important for our lives of what we're doing at that moment, it takes us time to get back to what we're doing.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember you taught me that tip long ago about turning off the notifications, and I have them all turned off right now, even text messages, because if I, am interrupted all day long by people needing something from me, I can't do the things that I need to do. And I think it's a way that we can really help people, especially in a work environment. And, when we think about ending burnout or meaningfully addressing stress, you are a role model for so many, and you and Thrive are really focused on that. Tell us about the focus of the work on stress and well-being and prevention.
Well, what we discovered through all our studies and focus groups and seminars around the world in 47 countries, actually, with hundreds of companies, is that behavior change is incredibly hard. And in order to achieve it, we need to look at the whole human. We can't just have a point solution. You need an interconnected solution. So our app is broken down into 6 journeys. Recharge, which is about sleep and the 60-second resets, these little breaks during the day that help us course correct from stress. Food, movement, focus that we already discussed. Money, financial stress, as you know, is a huge source of stress and negative health results. And connection, community. So taking these 6 journeys and breaking them down into hundreds of micro steps that we call too small to fail, really tiny daily steps that build a success muscle and become cumulatively healthy habits. And then storytelling. You and I are big believers in storytelling, in touching people's hearts and not just their minds. And I mean, the stories that you use in your work are so inspiring and empowering. And I think to change behavior, we need both science and storytelling.
Very well said. And, I often think back to the very first time we met, Ariana. I was so inspired by you. And one of the things I took away from that discussion is how you don't just talk about what needs to be done, you really do it yourself. And you talk very openly about your own journey of when you realized you needed to focus on reducing the stress in your life. Tell us a little about how the pandemic maybe made you and others more aware of the need for self-care, and are there any new lessons that you learned about yourself and your own self-care in the last 18 months?
Nancy, I think what the pandemic did is elevate the significance of self care. Because, as you know, self care can mean a lot of things. And I think the pandemic moved self care to the level of fundamental care for our bodies, our minds, our souls. And I think this has been incredibly significant. Now you have literally the Army Field Manual talking about sleep readiness.
Yes.
And we believe, you and I are now profoundly believe that when employees take care of themselves, they are more productive, more creative, more empathetic, more inclusive.
And more engaged in the company.
And when they are running on empty, they can still get stuff done. But all the qualities that we need, especially now in our hybrid world, like empathy, like collaboration, are the first to be depleted.
Ariana, one of the best gifts I've ever received, and I say this with all seriousness in my heart, is the bed you gave me for my mobile phone. And that really was back at the beginning of you focusing so much on sleep as a core fundamental asset of the work that you do. Help us understand the science behind sleep and how we can maximize our sleep habits.
So, as you know, Nancy, I wrote a whole book on sleep in 2016, The Sleep Revolution, which would love to give the PDF to anybody listening so they can themselves go deeper into the science of sleep as well as the tips and techniques to get a better night's sleep. But All the science of sleep shows unequivocally that sleep is foundational to our immunity, to our mental health, to our happiness, to our productivity. So you may ask, well, how come that for decades we have believed the contrary? We have believed that if you're going to be amazing at work and achieve a lot, you just need to power through exhaustion, all sorts of things which are completely unscientific. And I'm a bit of a nerd, so I wanted to study and understand where did this come from. And it really started with the first industrial revolution, when we started revering machines, and after machines, software. And the goal with both is to really minimize uptime. Like Salesforce launches a new piece of software and brags, this is 99.999% uptime. Well, the human operating system is different. For the human operating system, a downtime is not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah. And, I think it's so true that treasuring our bodies, getting enough sleep, making sure that we can be at peak performance are all really, really important. And talking about these things in the workplace is really important as well. Tell us a little about how you've built or shifted your workplace culture to support overall well-being.
The first is to have an entry interview with anybody when they start at Thrive, with their manager. And the first question of the entry interview is, what's important to you outside of work? And Nancy, that is so important because suddenly the new employee feels acknowledged in their full humanity. And they feel they can express what's important to them, as someone said, is to take my daughter to school at 7 o'clock every morning. Now, most often, especially women, would be reluctant to say something like that. And if their manager ends up having 7 a.m. conference calls every morning, it wouldn't be the manager's fault because maybe she could have them at 7:30.
Sure.
If she had the information. So we find that's pretty game changing. And it's also connected to our number one cultural value, which is compassionate directness.
And, providing a forum or a forced discussion almost is such a great way to build that relationship at Thrive. And I think many of our companies could learn from that. And you talked a little about how women especially may hesitate to speak up. And I want to shift gears a bit, because as women leaders, we are all becoming more comfortable at this intersection of leadership and being vulnerable, but it's still so challenging because of the responsibilities we hold and the number of people who depend upon us. I always look at you and I say, Ariana has perfected this because no matter what you're doing or what conversation you're in, you are 100% present, you are 100% authentic, and you're willing to be very vulnerable. So how did you find strength in vulnerability, and what happened to make you realize that that was okay?
I find that the key for me is to see life as a journey. When I keep learning and growing and evolving, and that's part of what I profoundly believe, kind of spiritually, that we need to give everyone the chance to redeem themselves, to learn from their mistakes, to grow, because otherwise, it's very hard to grow as a culture.
Tell us the last time you negotiated for yourself, and what advice would you give to everyone, young women and to all of us?
Well, I would say the first thing is to deal with that voice in our head that I call the obnoxious roommate living in our head, that puts us down, that tends to emphasize our mistakes, not, the way we should, to learn from them, but just to beat ourselves up over them. So I find that negotiating becomes much easier when we trust ourselves and find our own self-confidence. We lack that confidence, but it's something that can grow with the ability to take risks. It was a real blessing that I had a mother who helped me not be afraid of failing. And she used to say, failure is not the opposite of success, it's a stepping stone to success.
That's great advice. Is that the best advice you've ever received, or do you have other advice you've received along the way that has helped you, in on your journey?
I think a lot of my advice does come from my mother, who had never been to college, Nancy, but was just naturally wise. And she used to say to me, do everything you can in your life to move from struggle to grace. And what she meant by that is that life is always full of challenges. How can we move into the eye of the hurricane where we can remain centered and unflappable in the middle of challenges? That is a state of grace, instead of seeing life as a constant struggle. And it's really a matter of perspective. Nancy, we talk a lot about gratitude because scientifically, gratitude is the greatest antidote to anxiety, worry, fear. So, one of the things I do a lot is what we call habit stacking. Anytime you are doing something that doesn't involve your brain, I let my brain go to three things I'm grateful for.
So it's gratitude that you're internalizing gratitude you feel for things, but you also talk about expressing your gratitude to other people and how great that feels. Tell us a little about that, because when I think of all the amazing advice you give people, this connection with other people is so important. Tell us a little about that.
Expressing gratitude is so key. And we do it, for example, every Monday we have our all hands meeting, and part of it is gratitude. People can express gratitude to colleagues. And it's something which we don't often do because we think it's their job. But when we give that gratitude to them, whether it's professionally or personally, it makes a big difference. And it's part and parcel of living our lives more consciously. One of our micro steps in the connection giving journey is about avoiding impersonal relationships. Like you go to get your coffee in the coffee shop. If you just make a personal connection, say, it doesn't take any more time. But so often we don't.
That's right. And that personal connection could make somebody's day. You just don't know what other people are dealing with and how great it feels to say something nice to someone and see them smile back at you is just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yes, or in the days when I used to travel a lot, I made a point in a hotel, you would run into a housekeeper, and most of the time we wouldn't acknowledge it to say, hi, thank you so much, how are you? Honestly, it's nothing. But it also helps us because it makes us connect with people around us instead of walking through life in an impersonal, transactional way.
Ariana, your entire business focus right now and your personal focus is helping people navigate their overall well-being. But if you had to sum up your words of wisdom into one or two nuggets, what would you like to share with our audience?
So for me, Nancy, it's incredibly important to realize that there is a lot of suffering that's very hard to alleviate. But there is also a lot of suffering which is totally based on our behaviors. And that's really what my emphasis is on. And I know yours as well, because prevention is about changing behaviors. And and you've done so much amazing work on that changing behaviors around stress and how and what we eat and how much we exercise and how we sleep can have a huge impact on our heart health, on whether we become diabetic or not, on depression and anxiety. And these are tools that are in our control. I'm not saying it's easy.
That's right. That's why you have the micro steps, which I just love that concept. Do a little more today than you were doing yesterday.
Exactly. And also rituals, the little phone bed you mentioned, which is a charging station that looks like a phone bed with a little blanket. You can tuck
Little satin sheet. It's so cute. Yeah.
phone under it, you tuck it in, you reconnect in the morning. Is a ritual. And we all learn through rituals. And we need all the rituals we can get, because if we just depend on our willpower, it doesn't work. So we are big believers at Thrive in creating environments that support us.
I love that. Yeah.
Even if you live in a one-room apartment or you are in college, your nightstand is a place you can curate like a little altar.
Thank you for inspiring that. Arianna Huffington, I could talk to you all day, and I always leave our discussions feeling more energized and more committed to partner with you and others to spread the important power of prevention message. Thank you for being with us today. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you for all that you do to help us all thrive.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you for your amazing leadership and partnership through the years.
Okay, we'll see you soon. I always get such energy spending time with the wonderful Arianna Huffington, and I learned so much from her. Back before anyone was thinking about issues like sleep and stress, she was writing about them, she was talking about them, and she really helped create this global conversation, including in our companies. And today, in talking with her, I really took away the power of listening to your mother, first of all, and how her mother taught her that in her life she needed to move from struggle to grace. What a powerful statement that I think we all can live by. I would like to know what you took away from the conversation today. Please subscribe, comment, and share. I'm Nancy Brown. Thank you for joining in.
Next, on At the Heart of It with Nancy Brown, improving healthy resources for all.
Be brave enough to say, I need a break. Those are simple things that can save your life.
18th United States Surgeon General Dr. Regina Benjamin shows us just how she's making a healthy impact around the world. Next, At the Heart of It.